see all the devotees at ISKCON of Round Rock, Austin. And thank you so much for being here, all of you, dear devotees. It is because of you that the program here today is successful. Actually, the best thing is for us to meet in person. But since there is so much karmic reaction of the world remaining to be exhausted, and the world needs to breathe, so Maya Devi has arranged something by which nobody can travel. So, dear devotees, we are all seated here in our homes, respective homes, and because of that, we are unable to meet in person. I would have loved to meet all of you in person and discuss nectar of instruction, but at least we are able to meet virtually and have some Harikatha. So, some association is definitely better than no association. So, for me, I am getting the association of all of your devotees. For me, that in itself is a blessing, and I am getting the beautiful opportunity to discuss this wonderful text of Srila Rupa Goswami named Upadeshamrita or Nectar of Instruction. So, before we begin, I would once again like to thank Her Grace Mahasundari Mataji and His Grace Ram Vijay Prabhu for kindly organizing this entire 3 session program. I would like to thank His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada, who has kindly made this wonderful society the International Society for Krishna Consciousness. And I would like to thank my Diksha and Shiksha Gurus who have kindly imparted all these teachings of nectar of instruction to me. So I would like to begin with Mangalacharan. Then I would like to give a slight background of nectar of instruction, and then we will start with the first verse. I think the time allotted to me is 1.5 hours, including questions. So I will speak for 1 hour, and then we can have half an hour for questions. So let's begin with Mangalacharan. Most of us know these verses, so we can sing them together. ॐ अज्ञानतिमिरान्धस्य ज्ञानाञ्जनशलाकया चक्षुरुन्मीलितं येन तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः। श्रीचैतन्यमनोभीष्टं स्थापितं येन भूतले सोऽयं रूपः कदा मह्यं ददाति स्वपदान्तिकम्। वन्देऽहं श्रीगुरो श्रीयुतपदकमलं श्रीगुरून् वैष्णवांश्च श्रीरूपं साग्रजातं सहगण रघुनाथान्वितं तं सजीवं साद्वैतं सावधूतं परिजनसहितं कृष्णचैतन्यदेवं श्रीराधाकृष्णपादान् सहगण ललिता श्रीविशाखान्वितांश्च नमो विष्णुपादाय कृष्णप्रेष्ठाय भूतले श्रीमते भक्तिवेदान्त स्वामिन्निति नामिने। नमस्ते सारस्वते देवे गौरवाणी प्रचारिणे निर्विशेष शून्यवादी पाश्चात्यदेशतारिणे नमो महावदान्याय कृष्ण प्रेम प्रदायते कृष्णाय कृष्ण चैतन्य नामे गौरत्युषे नमः। हे कृष्ण करुणा सिंधो दीनबंधो जगत्पते गोपेश गोपिका कांत राधा कांत नमोस्तुते तप्त कांचन गौरांगी राधे वृंदावनेश्वरी वृषभानुसुते देवी प्रणमामि हरिप्रिये वाञ्छाकल्पतरुभ्यश्च कृपा सिन्धुभ्य एव च पतितानां पावनेभ्यो वैष्णवेभ्यो नमो नमः। जय श्री कृष्ण चैतन्य प्रभु नित्यानंद श्री अद्वैत गदाधर श्रीवासादि गौर भक्त वृंद हरे कृष्णा 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 हरे 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 राम 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 हरे हरे। श्रील रूप गोस्वामी प्रभुपाद की जय। श्रील प्रभुपाद की जय। अनंत कोटि वैष्णव वृंद की जय। जय गौर प्रेमानंदे। हरि हरि बोल। So thank you once again, dear devotees, for kindly being here. We are going to study the entire text of Srila Rupa Goswami's work named Upadeshamrita. It's a very essential text. It's a primer, what I would say. It's an introductory text for anybody who wants to get an entry into Krishna Bhakti, who wants to get an entrance into the pathways of Krishna consciousness. For all those people, this book is extremely important, because in this book there are so many principles given which are important for getting an entrance into bhakti. So in the first few verses we will see principles which are not directly bhakti, but which are important for getting an entrance into bhakti. Then we will see also some principles which are about direct execution of bhakti. And then in the final three verses, we will also see something about the prayojan, or the final goal to be attained by the execution of this entire process of bhakti. All this is put in a nutshell in Upadeshamrita. It's a short composition, a total of 11 verses, but in these 11 verses, Srila Rupa Goswami wants to ensure that we are going from absolute zero to the point where we know what is the goal of life in Krishna Bhakti. It's a very interesting thing that Srila Rupa Goswami's Upadeshamrita is listed as an independent work. Actually, all the verses and songs that Srila Rupa Goswami compiled, they were compiled under one heading called as Stavamala. Stavamala is a collection of all the verses and songs which Srila Rupa Goswami has composed. So all the short compositions are under Stavamala. But this work is not exactly a stava. It is not exactly a glorification of the Lord. This work is Upadesh. What is the meaning of Upadesh? Disha means direction. So Desh means the sense of giving direction. Upa means to make someone sit close to us. So to make someone sit close to us and give them a sense of direction, this is the meaning of Upadesh. Now, the question is, Srila Rupa Goswami, he appeared 500 plus years ago, and we are not even sitting close to him. In fact, we are not even sitting close to each other. So, what is the meaning of the term Upadesh? And how can it be called Upadeshamrita? Because Upadesh, or personal instruction, what you should do, what you should not do, is given to a disciple. We might have heard the term Upanishad. Upanishad means to make a disciple sit close to us and to give him instructions. That is the meaning of Upanishad. So, Upa always is used in the context of making someone sit close to us or bringing someone close to us. So, Upadesh means giving some direction to a person who is seated nearby. But we are neither seated nearby Rupa Goswami as far as physical space is concerned, We are neither situated close to Rupa Goswami as far as time is concerned. We are separated by 500 years, and we are situated far away from the spiritual world where Srila Rupa Goswami is currently residing. So, this being the case, how is it that Srila Rupa Goswami has openly in the public domain given these instructions which usually are given privately to a disciple? It's a very important thing to understand, because usually Srila Rupa Goswami does not give private instructions to anyone and everyone, but here we are finding those instructions. So there is a pastime behind Upadeshamrit. What is the pastime behind Upadeshamrit? This pastime is connected with one of the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. All of us might have heard of the name of this Goswami. This Goswami is named Srila Jiva Goswami, and Srila Jiva Goswami is the youngest of the six Goswamis of Vrindavan. Srila Jiva Goswami's contribution is unparalleled in the Gaudiya Vaishnava Sampradaya. So Srila Jiva Goswami was the youngest, and he was also the one who stayed in Vrindavan for the maximum duration of his life. He arrived in Vrindavan as a youth, which is between 15 to 20 years of age, and he stayed in Vrindavan for more than 60 years. He never left Vrindavan for a single day. So Srila Jiva Goswami, when he was a young child, that is around 4 or 5 years, his father Sri Vallabha Bhatt, Sri Vallabha, sorry, not Sri Vallabha, but Sri Vallabha, whose name is also Anupam. So he had two names, Vallabha or Anupam. So he passed away very early. When he passed away very early, at that point of time, Srila Jiva Goswami was staying in Bengal along with his mother. So his village was Chandrapur. So his Srila Jiva Goswami's village in Bengal was Chandrapur. So when he was staying in Chandrapur at that point of time when his father passed away, and his uncles Rupa Goswami and Sanatan Goswami had left government service and joined Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu in Puri and then subsequently in Vrindavan. At that point of time, Srila Jiva Goswami developed tremendous detachment in his heart, and he left for Sri Vrindavan along with a group of pilgrims. So when Srila Jiva Goswami arrived in Vrindavan with a group of pilgrims, at that point of time he met Srila Rupa Goswami. When Jiva Goswami met Rupa Goswami, Srila Rupa Goswami immediately understood that he has come because he wants to stay forever in Vrindavan. But education is very important. If he wants to stay in Vrindavan for his entire life, he should learn all the Shastras nicely. Because you have to spend so many years in bhajan, so many years performing his bhakti. You should learn how to read all the Shastras nicely. Because without reading Shastra, without Shastriya Shraddha, there is no question of advancement in devotional service. So, Srila Rupa Goswami instructed Srila Jiva Goswami, you go to Banaras, Kashi, Varanasi, and I will give you a letter. Show this letter to one big Pandit there. His name is Madhusudan Vidyavachaspati. Show this letter to Madhusudan Vidyavachaspati. And Madhusudan Vidyavachaspati was personally No, he was personally known to Srila Rupa Goswami. So Rupa Goswami wrote, I am sending my nephew Jiva to you. Please instruct him. Please give him nice instructions in grammar. First thing, please teach him grammar. Then Vedanta. Then Nyaya, Mimamsa, Alankar. All the Vedic Shastras should be taught to him. So Jiva Goswami went to Varanasi and studied under the tutelage of Sri Madhusudan Vidyavachaspati. When Srila Jiva Goswami returned back to Vrindavan, this was between 15 to 20 years of his age. At that point of time, Srila Jiva Goswami was a scholar beyond excellence. He had learned all the branches of knowledge that Sri Madhusudan Vidyavachaspati taught him in Varanasi. Now, one day, Srila Jiva Goswami, he was sitting near Srila Rupa Goswami, and Srila Jiva Goswami was given the task of fanning Rupa Goswami. He used to fan Rupa Goswami when Rupa Goswami was writing Tirasamrit Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. This is the task which was given to him. So Srila Jiva Goswami had a very important opportunity at that point of time, because he knew that later he would write a commentary on Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, Nectar of Devotion. So when Rupa Goswami is writing Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, at that point of time, Srila Jiva Goswami is asking him all the questions and getting all the doubts clarified right on the spot from the author. Directly from the author, he is getting all the doubts clarified. Once that happens, then this is a very wonderful commentator, because usually many commentators have never met the original author. Many commentators write a commentary when they have never met the original author. For example, so many commentaries on Bhagavad Gita have been written without even being in the personal presence of Lord Krishna in Kurukshetra. But Jiva Goswami was not like that. He is a commentator who was directly fanning the author while the author was writing the while writing the original work. So at one point of time, there was one scholar, his name was Vallabh Bhatt. He came and he saw a particular verse that Rupa Goswami was writing, and he made a passing comment, a passing remark, that there is some small fault in this verse. I can see some problem. This verse needs to be corrected. Rupa Goswami did not say anything and said, okay, I will consider your suggestion. But Srila Jiva Goswami could not tolerate that. And since he had learned so much in Varanasi, he wanted an outlet for displaying some of that. So once this Vallabha Bhatta had gone away, Srila Jiva Goswami took permission from Rupa Goswami, said, I want to go and freshen up, I'll go to the Yamuna river. So he went to the Yamuna river and caught hold of Vallabha Bhatta, who was there. And at that point of time, he had a debate with Vallabha Bhatta as on the specific fault that he had picked up in Srila Rupa Goswami's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. So at that point of time, Srila Rupa Goswami, uh, Sri Vallabh Bhatta could not defend his point. So he was so impressed with Jiva Goswami's scholarship that he came back to Rupa Goswami and said, I don't know who was sitting with you, but he's such a learned person. He proved to me that what you are writing is absolutely correct. So I'm very sorry that I pointed out this error, but I stand corrected. So at that point of time, Rupa Goswami understood. Rupa Goswami said, Acha, if that is the case, if this trend is set in Vrindavan, that those Gaudiya Vaishnavas who are learning under me are engaging in Vad Vivad, scriptural debate in Vrindavan. Scriptural debate is okay in Kashi, but if this trend continues in Vrindavan, then Vrindavan will become another Kashi, another Varanasi, where everybody is debating people on the river banks. And then the sweet culture of Vrindavan will get spoiled. So the entire world can be for scriptural debate, but Vrindavan should not be for this scriptural debate. Vrindavan should be kept pure and clean for executing bhakti, not for the spirit of wrangling debates. So he understood that Jiva Goswami should be taught one important uh, aspect of life, which is Vacho Vegam, that you should understand. Srila Jiva Goswami, tomorrow you are the commentator on my words. So first thing you should understand, you want to instruct so many people in the world, but before instructing so many people in the world, you should understand that there are certain qualifications required for instructing other people. What are the qualifications required for instructing other people? You should learn these qualifications. So he sent Jiva Goswami away for some time out of Vrindavan. And finally, when Jiva Goswami asked for forgiveness and he came back, then he gave these personal instructions to Srila Jiva Goswami. So these are Srila Rupa Goswami's personal instructions to Srila Jiva Goswami, dear devotees. These are not personal instructions to anyone, because Rupa Goswami does not give personal instructions in a public forum. So these are Srila Rupa Goswami's personal instructions to Srila Jiva Goswami. One of the manuscripts of Upadeshamrit, which is preserved in the Asiatic Society in Calcutta, it says Jiva Goswami ne Vairagyartham Upadesham. These are instructions to Srila Jiva Goswami for detachment in spiritual life. And this Upadeshamrita was kindly made available by Srila Jiva Goswami to all his followers, and thereby we now have the personal instructions that Srila Rupa Goswami gave to Srila Jiva Goswami. So dear devotees, in our spiritual life, many times we are being disturbed by various difficulties. And there is a verse in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and I would like to show this verse of Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu to all of you. So this verse I will show on the screen, but I think screen sharing, yes, is enabled now.
So I just enabled it for you.
Yes. So this is Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.115. I hope everybody can see this verse on their screens now. Srila Rupa Goswami has made a very important point, that if you want to execute bhakti, you should be free of certain things. What are the things you should be free of? He says, Shoka Amarsha Adibhir Bhavair Akrantam Yasya Manasam. He says, Yasya Manasam, whose mind, any person's mind, if it is Akrantam, if it is overtaken by Bhavair, by feelings. So anybody's mind, if it is overcome by feelings, which feelings? Shoka, lamentation, amarsha, anger, adi, and other negativities. So if anybody's mind is overcome by lamentation, anger, and other negativities, Rupa Goswami says, Katham Tatra, how is it possible that in such a mind, Mukundasya Spurti Sambhavana Bhavet? What is the possibility of spontaneously remembering Lord Mukunda for such a person? What is the possibility? It's a rhetorical question. It means there is absolutely no possibility for a person whose mind is disturbed by shoka, lamentation, amarsha, krodha, which means anger. So Srila Jiva Goswami temporarily developed some anger against Vallabha Bhatta. For this reason, Srila Rupa Goswami wanted to highlight this thing. If you want to stay in Vrindavan, your mind should be completely free from all these negativities. Because if somebody's mind, yasya manasam, akrantam, is overcome by bhavair, by the feelings of shok, amarsh, lamentation, anger, and katham tatra mukundasya spurti sambhavana bhavet. How is it possible that such a person will ever spontaneously remember? You see, dear devotees, it's very important to read the direct words of Shastra and understand, because one tiny verse can give us so much understanding into spiritual life, such understanding into spiritual life that we cannot get by our own mental speculation for hundreds of years. Therefore, it is very important to come in direct contact with the words of Shastra. It is so important to read the direct words of Shastra. Therefore, Rupa Goswami wanted that Jiva Goswami should not come under the control of these bhavas, these feelings, shoka, amarsha, etc. For this reason, he gave a very important instruction to Jiva Goswami that Jiva Goswami, you should control these six urges in the body. This is the first verse of Upadeshamrit, nectar of instruction, and the specific meter of this verse is Upajati. I will recite this verse. Vacho vegam manasah krodha vegam jihva vegam udaropastha vegam etan vegan yo vishahet dhirah sarvam api imam prithivim sashishyat. Let's see the word for word that Srila Prabhupada has given. Vacha of speech, vegam urge, manasah of the mind, krodha anger, vegam urge, jihva of the tongue, vegam urge, udar upastha of the belly and genitals, vegam urge, etan these, vegan urges, yah whoever, vishahet can tolerate, dhirah sober, sarvam all, api certainly, imam this prithivim world, saha that personality, shishyat can make disciples. Let's see the translation. A sober person who can tolerate the urge to speak, the mind's demands, the actions of anger, and the urges of the tongue, belly, and genitals, is qualified to make disciples all over the world. Dear devotees, there is one important thing. There are six urges which are given here. So there is cause and effect relationship given in this verse. What is the cause and effect? If you satisfy these things, if the cause is satisfied, then you can get the effect. What is the cause? Cause is controlling six urges. Effect is the ability to make disciples all over the world. This is the cause and effect relationship given in this specific verse. So what are the six urges? Let's see again in the verse above. First is Vacho Vegam. The first urge is the urge to speak something, urge of the speech faculty. Second is Manasaha Vegam, the urge of the mind. Third is Krodha Vegam, the urge of anger. Fourth is Jihva Vegam, the urge of the tongue. Fifth is Udara Vegam, the urge of the belly. Sixth is Upastha Vegam, and the urge of the genitals. These are the six urges mentioned in this verse. Now, Etan Vegan, these urges, Yah, whosoever, we Sahid, There is something called as sahet. In Hindi it is called sehna, tolerate. And V means nicely, visheshena, sahet. One who nicely tolerates, one who expertly tolerates. When V is combined with saheta, it becomes Visha. The sa turns into sha and it becomes Vishahet. Somebody who nicely tolerates these six urges becomes known as somebody. What does he become known as? He becomes known as Dhiraha. This person becomes known as a sober person. Then such a sober person, Sarvam api imam prithvim, for this entire world, so that Dhiraha can shishyat, can make disciples. So this is the simple meaning of the term. Okay. Now I would like to point out something here. And what I would like to point out is that in the Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, there is a very important thing which is given. What is the important thing given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu? The important thing given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu is there is one important limb of bhakti given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. All of you can see the verse. This verse is in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu 1.2.70.
Hari Prashad people, we're not able to see that verse. We're still seeing 12115.
Okay, just a minute. I will share the new screen so that you are able to see that. Can you now see?
Yes, yes, Lord. Is that Shishya the Sangatya Durena? Okay. Yes,
so this is one of the 64 limbs of bhakti. What is one of the 64 limbs of bhakti is Shishya Adi Ananubandhitvam. Do not make too many disciples. This is one of the 64 limbs of bhakti. I hope you are able to see. This is one of the 64 limbs of bhakti given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu itself. Do not make too many disciples. And on the other hand, we are being given this instruction. What is the instruction that we are being given? Sarvam api imam prithvim se shishyat. That person can create disciples all over the world. When I read this Shastra, I find that something is not matching here. In Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, the instruction is you should not create too many disciples. And here, the instruction is you can create disciples all over the world. So something is missing here. Some link is missing here which we need to explore. So one thing has to be understood. What has to be understood? That this is a textbook. Nectar of Instruction is a textbook for those who are entering into bhakti. Those who are entering into bhakti, they see that there are so many senior devotees who are having so many disciples. Sometimes the new devotee develops this desire. Oh, if when I become a senior devotee, at that point of time, I also want to have so many followers. So this is what is called as Badish Amish Nyaya. What is Badish Amish Nyaya? Badish Amish Nyaya means sometimes when you want to catch an impure substance like a fish, at that point of time, on the hook, because in order to catch a fish, you have to put something on the hook. What do you put on the hook? On the hook, you put another impure substance. Because the fish will not be attracted if you put sandesh on the hook. The fish will be attracted if you put some worm on the hook. So in order to attract a person who is not fully pure, an instruction has to be given which matches the mental level of that person. So this is an instruction for a person who is entering into bhakti. But later that same person will read Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. And that person will come to know Shishya Adi Ananubandhitvam. Do not get into the cycle of creating too many disciples. So it's a very classic example of giving someone a comb when they have become bald. Because by the time a person controls these 6 urges, they will lose all their desire for creating disciples. I hope you are able to understand. So, by the time a person spends his energy, his vital forces in controlling these 6 urges, he will say, Arey Baba, I have lost all desire, including the desire to create disciples. Yeah. Because what was I going to get by creating disciples? I was going to get nice sense enjoyment. But array, now I have to also control that sense enjoyment because I can't have Udar Vegam, Jivva Vegam. So what is the point of creating disciples? If these disciples, they give me some enjoyment and I can't even accept that enjoyment. So better I don't create disciples. So dear devotees, this is how instructions are given. This is how Acharya Shaili. This is the method of teaching of Acharyas. They are giving some instruction so that we follow it. Ultimately, the aim is not to create disciples all over the world. Please try to understand. This is not bhakti. To create disciples all over the world is not bhakti. In fact, to create too many disciples can sometimes go against one's bhakti. This is clearly mentioned in Bhakti Rasamrita. So, the aim is to love Krishna. The aim is given in the final 3 verses of Upadeshamrita. To always favorably remember Krishna on the banks of Radha Kund. That will come in the final 3 verses. But first and foremost, control these 6 urges. Now, dear devotees, Rupa Goswami could have told us to control any urge. There are so many urges in the body. And please understand that thousands of urges should not be controlled. I will give you an example. For example, the urge to sleep. How many of us every day get the urge to sleep? Or almost all of us. Yes, I also get the urge to sleep. Rupa Goswami does not say you should control the urge to sleep. So he knows very well there are so many urges in the body that should not be controlled. Because if you control those urges in the body, then your body will become unhealthy. So in this verse, he is specifying only those urges which can be potentially, I quote unquote, potentially controlled by all human beings. And somebody may say, but Prabhu, I find myself utterly incapable of controlling these 6 urges. And the solution is very simple. That you don't create disciples all over the world. That's all. Nothing else. If you don't fulfill the conditions, you don't get the benefit. And the the important thing is if you fulfill the condition, you will lose the desire to get the benefit. In both cases, you are not going to create disciples all over the world. So then the best thing is to try to control all these things, but finally the aim is not to create disciples all over the world. So first is Vacho Vegam. Vacho Vegam means the urge of the speech faculty. Srila Prabhupada says in the purport that everybody has got a tendency to speak. And as soon as somebody is given the opportunity, they start speaking some nonsense. So the proper use of the speech faculty, Vacho Vegam, there are two proper uses. First is to speak only that which is related to Shastra and to Krishna Bhakti specifically. Only to speak something like that. Speak something on the basis of Shastra and speak something in relation to Krishna Bhakti. So this is the technique for controlling the Vega or the urge for speech. Now many times devotees start speaking something which is not based on Shastra. So that becomes counted as Vacho Vegam. So that should be controlled. So this is the first urge which should be controlled. What happens when this urge is not controlled? So when this urge is not controlled, at that point of time, what happens is that one can end up speaking something which is not supposed to be spoken. And by speaking something which is not supposed to be spoken, one immediately spoils one's relationships with other individuals. So Vacho Vegam, one should try to control this urge of speaking. How can one control? So as I said, by speaking only in relationship with the scriptures. Now somebody may say, Prabhu, this is a very lofty ideal. How can I only speak in relationship with the Shastra? Tell us something practical. So I will tell you something practical. I will not give you a lofty theoretical instruction. Oh, everybody should now, after this seminar, everybody should speak only from Shastra and relation to Krishna. And everybody says, wow, Jai, thank you, Prabhu. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. And everybody goes home and forgets the instruction. So this sort of impractical instruction will not be given here. At least I will not give. Because my duty is to give something which everybody can implement in their life. Okay, so how can we practically control? And from Shastra. So we can control by seeing the verse given in Bhagavad Gita 17.15. Everybody should note down this verse 17.15. Okay, dear devotees, please see this verse. I hope everybody can see this verse on the screen. अनुद्वेगकरं वाक्यं सत्यं प्रियहितं चयत् स्वाध्यायाभ्यसनं चैव वाङ्मयं तप उच्यते. Krishna is speaking tapa. He's saying austerity. Which austerity? Vangmayam, austerity of speech. So everybody should practice some austerity of speech. Okay, how should we practice austerity of speech? Because since we are born in human form of life, God has given so many syllables to us which He has not given to the animals. In the English language, there are 26 syllables. In Sanskrit, there are more than 50. So animals don't have this wide range of syllables given to them. So using these wide range of syllables, we sometimes insult other people and speak nonsense. So Krishna says we should regulate this tapa. Since we are yogis, we should perform some austerity of speech. So what is austerity of speech? First is anudvega karam vakyam. When you speak, it should be anudvega karam. It should not cause any agitation to other living entities. First thing, try to ensure this. Whatever I speak, I will try my best to not cause any agitation, mental agitation to the person whom I am speaking, even if it means it in my workplace. So, but in my workplace, sometimes I have to cause agitation to others. Yes, if we are senior to somebody, if we have been given charge of somebody and we have to discipline somebody, so as a matter of duty, we can speak something which is udvegakara. Udvegakara means which causes some anxiety to them, because it is a responsibility to correct somebody who is under us. Rupa Goswami also chastised Jiva Goswami. At that point of time, it was not anudvegakara. Definitely it is udvegakara. So anudvegakaram means in normal speech, when we are speaking to people who are not our juniors or not our disciples, in normal speech, it should be anudvegakaram vakyam. Our sentences should not generate any anxiety in the minds of others. Second is satyam. They should be based on truth. Third should be priya. Priya means they should appear very delightful to the person who's hearing that speech. And hitam means it should cause ultimately it should cause benefit to the listener. These are the four characteristics. Anudvegakaram, first is not generating any anxiety. Satyam, truth. Priya, generating positive feelings in the ear and the heart. And fourth is hitam, which is giving ultimate benefit to the listener. The four characteristics should be a part of our speech. And if we can't do that, then Swadhyaya Abhyasanam, then sit quietly and perform self-study. Sit quietly and perform self-study. Swadhyaya and Abhyasanam. Repeat. Swadhyaya means self-study, Abhyas means repeat. Practice that what you have studied. This is Vangmayam Tapa. This is for a yogi. A bhogi may not be able to do this, but for a yogi, they should try to regulate their speech. They should try to regulate by this. Everybody should read this. And in the purport of this, Prabhupada has very clearly said, of course, he says one should not speak in a way to agitate the minds of others. Of course, when a teacher speaks, he can speak the truth for the instruction of his students. But such a teacher should not speak to those should not speak to those who are his students if he will agitate their minds. So very importantly, Prabhupada himself has told in the purport that if we are a teacher instructing a student, then we can sometimes agitate their mind. Otherwise, we have no business in agitating anybody's mind. It's a very important instruction. We'll go back to our Vacho Vegam, Manasaha Krodha Vegam. Now, this is first Vacha Vegam. Second is Manasaha Vegam, urge of the mind. Urge of the mind is not a single urge. There are thousands of urges in the mind. What are the thousands of urges in the mind? Shoka, lamentation, krodha, anger. In fact, the next is krodha vegam. Now, it is actually krodha arises in the mind. So, krodha vegam is actually a subset of manasana vegam. We can see a krodha arises nowhere else. Krodha arises in the mind. When does krodha arise in the mind? When we feel that somebody has done some aparadh against us, some offense against us. At that point of time, krodha arises in the mind. So, krodha is also a vega or an urge of the mind, manasaha. So, they first and foremost control the urges of the mind. Now, it is so difficult to control all the urges of the mind that Arjun in the Bhagavad Gita says, Chanchalam hi mana Krishna pramadhi balavat dridam tasya nigrahanam manye vayorapi sushkaram. Mind is so difficult to control that I believe that it is better to control the blowing wind. It is easier to control the blowing wind than to control the mind. So Arjun basically gives up on the possibility of controlling the mind. At that time, Krishna says, Abhyasena tu kaunteya vairagyena. It is possible to gradually control it by abhyas, by constant practice and by detachment. Abhyas and vairagya. These two are essential for controlling the mind. So this is a very difficult urge to control, dear devotees, manasaha vegam, because there are many urges arising in the mind. At every point of time, there is some anxiety in the mind. So this urge will take immense maturity in Krishna consciousness to control. Because without immense maturity in Krishna consciousness, it will not be possible to control this urge. Manasaha Vegam. By the time a person is capable of controlling Manasaha Vegam, by that time a person will definitely have become an extremely pure devotee. Because somebody who can control the mind, there is nothing else remaining to be controlled in the entire world. So Manasaha Vegam is one of the difficult urges to control. But what is the way of controlling the mind? The way of controlling the mind is very simple. The way of controlling the mind is to ensure that the mind becomes addicted to Krishna Bhakti. See, the mind is very difficult to control, but it has one property. What is that one property? It easily becomes addicted to something which it finds attractive. This is the one property of the mind which can be used against the mind. Please try to understand, dear devotees. This is the one tendency of the mind. It becomes very easily addicted. Addiction is the tendency of the mind. So this addiction, if it becomes in relation to Krishna Bhakti or in relation to any of the limbs of Krishna Bhakti. For example, somebody becomes addicted to performing kirtan at least 3 or 4 hours every day. So very good addiction, dearly. Very good addiction. How many of us would like to have such addictions in life? I would like to join this addicts group of uh, 4 hour kirtan every day. So I am in my life I am trying to join the addict group of Shastra. That is what I am trying to do. I am trying to become addicted to reading of bhakti literature. So this is a very important engagement for the mind, dear devotees. So once a mind becomes addicted, then the mind will push you. Arey, why did you not read today? Why did you not perform kirtan today? So this manasaha vegam, then the mind will have urges, but those urges will be in the service of the Lord. So those will be controlled urges. Actually speaking, it is not possible to control all the urges of the mind simultaneously. But when one becomes addicted to something devotional, at that point of time the urges become devotionalized. The mental urges become devotionalized, and devotionalized mental urges are controlled urges. They are not uncontrolled urges. So that is what. Okay. So we may devotionalize so many urges of the mind. But Rupa Goswami says there is one urge of the mind which is not easily devotionalizable, or which is not easily dovetailed into bhakti, which is that urge of the mind, krodha vegam. Krodha vegam is the urge of becoming angry. So very difficult to dovetail this in Krishna bhakti. Sometimes very easy. You become angry towards non-devotees. Well, it's not so easy. Every day, are you going to find a non-devotee and become angry towards them? So it's not that. Most of the times we are surrounded by devotees. And if this vega, if this urge is let out in front of the devotees, then it will be a big obstacle on the path of our bhakti. So this urge should be controlled by all means. If at all it has to be vented out somewhere, if you can't find any other, vent out for this urge, then it is said that you can let it out on non-devotees. But dear devotees, the ideal thing is to not even let it out in front of non-devotees. Why? Because Rupa Goswami himself is Dhira Adhira Janapriya. He is dear not only to Dhira, to the sober people, but also to those who are Adhira, those who are not sober. So Rupa Goswami was not going around Vrindavan and becoming angry, finding a non-devotee and becoming angry on them. Or he was not writing angry words in his books against non-devotees. If you read all the works of the six Goswamis, you will not find a single word of criticism against anybody. Against anybody, you will not find a single word of criticism. So read all the works of the Goswami and find me the name of one individual who has been criticized. Open, I won't say challenge, it's open homework for everybody. Henceforth, for your entire life, whenever you read the works of the six Goswami, find one person who has been criticized by name. So I am guaranteeing it will not be found. So Jihva Veg, this is Krodha Veg. Krodha Vegam should be controlled. How should it be controlled? One should control Krodha Vegam by accepting a humble position in front of devotees and rendering some service to them from time to time. Because many people are having this feeling that I am someone special. So nobody should commit an offense again. Nobody should commit an aparadh against me. Once that feeling that I am special, I am privileged, I am born in this family, I have so much money, don't you know, I am the biggest donor of the temple. Once this feeling goes away, then Krodha Vegam will subside. As long as this feeling is there, Arey, I am special, I am privileged, I am a big donor, I am a big scholar, nobody should offend me. See, till that point of time, Krodha Vegam, the possibility of Krodha Vegam will be there. Once there is genuine humility, see, genuine humility has to arise somewhere. Either Maya gives one slap and we become disabled physically in our old age, then we cannot exhibit Krodha Vegam towards anybody. We are dependent on others. Either Maya teaches us something, or either we learn it ourselves. So very important. Krodha Vegam. So to tolerate this Krodha Vegam, service towards devotee should be cultivated. Next is Jivva Vegam. Jivva Vegam means urge of tasting something nice foodstuffs. So this Jivva Vegam refers to eating in an uncontrolled manner, eating beyond one's capacity. So different devotees have different capacities of eating. But when we find that our stomach is filled half, at that point of time, our body gives us an indication. We start feeling full. And at that point of time, a devotee should try to stop eating more. Because if one is eating simply for the sake of sense gratification, then such a person has no business trying to instruct the entire world. So such a person has no business becoming the instructor of other people. Jivva Vegam means one should have controlled eating. One should eat less. One should not specifically demand some opulent foodstuffs. That, oh, I am Hari Parshad Das. Next time I come to Austin, Ram Vijay Prabhu should cook paneer sabji for me only. Otherwise, I will not stay at his home. If I say something like that, then I am falling, then I am falling prey to Jihva Vegam. So this should not be done. Why? Because I am not that such important person that I can demand. In fact, no devotee should assume such an important person in life that they start demanding some specific prasadam item, that you only make this for me, or I like only this. So the devotee should honor a broad variety of prasadam and should eat less. This is the uh, method of controlling Jihva Vegam. And on Ekadashi and other fasting days, the devotee should observe fasting. So this is the method of controlling Jihva Vegam. Of course, in the spiritual world, you can eat as much as you want, but as long as you are a sadhak till that point of time, in order to avoid getting contaminated in the material world, we have to control Jihva. Then Udara Vegam. Udara means belly. So belly doesn't mean the urge to eat. Belly here is an indicative term. It indicates the effort to defend oneself and preserve one's life. So in Hindi we say, sometimes we say, पेट पालने के लिए करना पड़ता है, which means to continue my livelihood I have to do this. To fill my belly I have to do these things. So Udar Vegam means in order to fill their bellies, people construct big palaces. People live very opulent lives. And somebody may say, so what is your problem with this? Or is bhakti so fatalistic that you can't even build a big palace and stay inside a big palace? So the thing is, you want to become a sadhak. Please try to understand. You don't want to become an ordinary person in the world outside. So, Udar Vegam means when one tries to become like an ordinary person outside and tries to unlimitedly fulfill worldly desires and collect unlimited, collect and collect unlimitedly. So this is called as Udar Vegam. Udar Vegam means collecting so much with something which one does not need, and because of that, because of collecting so much, holding so much, then one stockpiles so much, and then one thinks that I am the enjoyer of all of this. Then one cannot think of bhakti so easily. Then one's meditation will be, oh, I have collected so much today, tomorrow I will collect again. Today I have so much money, tomorrow I will have so much more. So if this is the thought process, then what is the question of becoming a devotee? For a sadhak, they should collect, but they should try to reduce their uh, tendency for collecting, hoarding, and enjoying so many material objects because they are sadhakas. All sadhakas in the past have done like this. Sometimes devotees say, oh, Yukta Vairagya Prabhu. So, Yukta Vairagya should not become like a method for secretly engaging in sense gratification. We should know what is the meaning of Yukta Vairagya. Yukta Vairagya specifically means one thing. What does it mean? Yukta means in direct relationship with the service of the Lord. Whatever is in direct relationship with the service of the Lord, whatever is in with yoga and yukta, they are belonging to the same category of words. So whatever is in yoga, in connection with the service of the Lord, accepting that facility, that is called as yukta vairagya, while remaining internally detached. That is yukta vairagya. Not that tomorrow every month I am purchasing the latest and greatest cell phone and I am saying, oh, yukta vairagya. It is not yukta vairagya. What is the relation with Krishna seva? Nothing but I am a devotee. So whatever I do is yukta vairagya. Some people have this mindset. I am a devotee. So whatever I do is yukta vairagya. So let's understand what is the technical definition of yukta vairagya. Otherwise, what is the difference between a devotee and a karmi? The difference is that whatever is needed for Krishna seva, that I will take. So that is yukta vairagya. So, and finally is upasthavegam. Upasthavegam means urge of the genitals. See, every human being is born with the urge to engage in sex life. Every human being, as soon as they hit what is known as puberty, at that time there are certain physical and mental changes that undergo every human's body. So, in traditional Vedic society, there is an arrangement. As soon as somebody becomes of marriageable age, for example, around 16, 17, and the boy is around 18 and 19, at that time they used to get married. Why? Because there is a dharmic way, there is a religious sanctioned way of uh, satisfying the upastha way, satisfying the urge for sex life. But in today's age, people do not get married so early. But the urge doesn't go away. Please try to understand. Sometimes people don't get married so early, but the urge doesn't go away. Then what is the remaining option? And there is no shastrically legal remaining option. Whatever are the remaining options are not prescribed in Shastra. So then one engages in uncontrolled upasthavik. And when one engages in uncontrolled upasthavik, at that point of time, one cannot become a devotee. Especially, one cannot make disciples all over the world. So, in order to control upasthavik, there is a arrangement made in Vedic culture. There is an ashram made in Vedic culture. What is the ashram? This ashram is Grihastha ashram. So Grihastha ashram is a way, a religiously sanctioned way by which one can try to control upasthavegam, because everybody is going to have it. Unless one is a Mahan yogi from previous life, only 1% Krishna consciousness is remaining to be executed. Till that point, if some extraordinary case may be different, but I am speaking of general case like myself. So they are all going to have upasthaveg. Upasthaveg means they are going to have this tendency. But in today's age, there are two extremes seen. What are the two extremes? Either full sense enjoyment or shaming people who engage in such sense enjoyment. Both extremes are there. So both extremes are avoided in Vedic society. Why? Get married at proper time. And after getting married, then there are specific times of the month. It's not unrestricted. So very restricted times of the month when one is religiously allowed to engage in controlled sex life. So by the time one's vital forces in the body they go down after a certain age, at that point of time one becomes naturally detached from engaging in uncontrolled upastha veg. These are the 6 urges. So one can naturally control upastha veg by 2 processes. One is either become pure devotee as soon as possible in one's youth. If that happens, very well, nice. If that doesn't happen, Vedic culture will still save us. Why? By giving us an ashram. So if that ashram is available, then we should take shelter of ashram. In that way, one can try to control one's upastha veg. And one who is able to tolerate these 6, such a person can instruct the entire world. Dear devotees, this is the first verse of Upadeshamrita. So uh, today I gave an introduction of Upadeshamrita and did the first verse. So please don't worry. In the remaining 2 sessions, I will cover the 10 verses. Some of you may be thinking how we will cover the remaining 10 verses. So a lot of time today was spent in discussing the introduction and the first verse. But now that we move ahead in the next session onwards, we will cover 5 verses per session, and then it will be easier for us to understand the entire Upadeshamrita. From now onwards, it becomes specific. The verses get very specific, and so the explanations will not be so lengthy. But this is the first verse. But try to understand, dear devotees, the aim is not to make disciples all over the world. Please don't think that I will satisfy the criteria and make disciples all over the world. Anybody who's thinking like this, making a big mistake. Please, with folded hands, I request you. Please don't get into the business of making disciples. Please, it's a very dangerous business. A very dangerous business. Please don't get into the business of making disciples. Why? A disciple, array, our own mind has hundreds of problems. We are not able to control it. And then disciple comes with his 100 problems to us. And disciple expecting, this is my guru. Array, this guru will help me and control all my urges. And he will take me back home, back to Godhead. And poor guru is thinking, Are Baba, my own going back to Godhead is doubtful, and this disciple is dependent on me that he will take me back to Godhead. So unless one is absolutely sure that I will be able to deliver my disciple back home, back to God, one should not get into the business of making disciples. I'm sorry, it may appear as a strong instruction, but this is an instruction which will save many spiritual lives. Which will save many spiritual lives. That we should make a disciple only when we are able to take complete control and give complete direction to the spiritual life of that disciple. It's a very simple thing. Because a disciple has put trust in us. At the moment of death, who will the disciple remember? The disciple is going to remember the guru, and the guru himself is doubtful. At that point of time, the disciple will feel cheated. So, dear devotees, very important that we should make disciples only after we have attained a certain level. So, I will pause here, and I would once again like to thank all of you who so kindly listened. So, I will take questions now. So I will see the first question is here. I think this is by Mahasundari Taji. How does this verse fit into preaching then? One may not want to make disciples, but is expected to preach, and people tend to take instruction, shiksha from them. Now, of course, we can give shiksha. Actually speaking, uh, the interpretation of this verse that Srila Prabhupada has done is one can make disciples all over the world. And the literal term used is Prithvim says Shishyat. Shishyat means Anushasan. He can instruct. So one of the meanings of the verse can also be such a person can instruct the entire world. Besides the meaning which Prabhupada has given, that he can create disciples all over the world. The thing is, Traditionally also, the thing is, it is encouraged to not create so many disciples. Srila Rupa Goswami's encouragement is to not create so many disciples. We preach all over the world, and definitely, but then if we are preaching all over the world, then we should also have so many number of gurus. That is also one. We have preached all over the world, then there can be so many gurus who can take charge of few number of disciples. That is actually a very good strategy. That, in this is my personal opinion, that's a very good strategy. That many number of gurus take charge of few disciples. Everybody takes charge of few disciples. Of course, then some exceptions are there. Some gurus, they are able to take charge of more disciples. So I can't give a number here, but every guru should meditate on this. That every person who is preaching should meditate on this. What is the instruction of Rupa Goswami? The instruction of Rupa Goswami, Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, is don't get into too many disciples, because once the too many disciples, and if I cannot give time to my disciples, if we cannot give time to those disciples, then the disciple will find some other source of guidance. Once the disciple finds some other source of guidance, then uh, what I feel is a better arrangement is that to have many gurus, and then every guru has little disciples. Of course, there can be exceptions everywhere, as I said. Some guru may be more powerful and may be able to accept more disciples. That is the uh, that can be an exception. A general rule is to create lesser number of disciples. We can see Srila Rupa Goswami himself. He had very few disciples. Jiva Goswami himself, few disciples. Exception is certain acharyas, certain gurus, but that cannot become the norm. The norm is to have lesser number. Okay. Another question. Thank you for the nice class. You mentioned Satyam in Bhagavad Gita 17.15. Could you elaborate upon the lines you see? Essential truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. So that verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita, cha saram cha vacho hi vagmita. This quote is from Naishadhiya Charitra of Sri Harsha. There is a verse in Chaitanya Charitamrita which says essential truth spoken concisely is true eloquence. So we have to speak the truth. We have to speak the truth. And if we can speak it concisely in as little words as possible, that is true eloquence. For example, I can go to a classroom and tell all the students, dear students, now it is time to go home. All of you pack your bags, and now all of you can go back home and come here tomorrow again. It's a very long sentence. Or I can go in a classroom and say, dear students, the bell has rung. So students will automatically understand it's time to go home. So this is truth. I've spoken it concisely. So that is eloquence. That is something which an expert person can do. If we are expert enough in the art of speaking concisely, we should do that. But if we can't speak concisely, at least we should speak satya. At least speak the truth. So that everybody can do, because speaking the truth is Sanatan Dharma. It is eternal religious principle. Satyam vada, dharmam chara. Upanishad says, speak the truth, walk on the path of dharma. You mentioned Rupa Goswami. Next question. You mentioned Rupa Goswami, Jiva Goswami. Where can we learn more about Rupa Goswami's personal instructions to Jiva Goswami? Well, these are the only set of personal instructions that Jiva Goswami passed on to his followers. There are no other personal instructions. There are general instructions given in Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu and other books. But these are the specific instructions which were given to Jiva Goswami. So this is a valuable piece of Gaudiya Vaishnava history that we are having with us. But otherwise, there are no personal instructions given anywhere, because it is only through the collection of Jiva Goswami that this work was brought to light. Otherwise, Rupa Goswami personally, in his Tavavali, in his Tavamala and other works, he was not into giving public instructions to everybody. He knew very well the instruction is for a specific person and they should not be publicized. But Jiva Goswami, he understood that these instructions should be followed by everybody. So he very mercifully gave these instructions also to his disciples, and through him, the instructions were brought to light. Next question. Gopal Chandra Prabhu. We are here that anger can be used in Krishna's service. Example, Hanuman's case. Is it practically in our day-to-day life? Also, when you mentioned the goal shouldn't be to make disciples, does that imply that these instructions are not only for people who want to make disciples, but for everyone as well? Yes, as you said, it is like bait for the fish. Yes. So Gopal Chandra Prabhu, there are two questions. First question is, anger can be used in Krishna's service like Hanuman. So Hanuman's anger is very controlled anger, dear devotees. Hanuman burned the Lanka, but did not burn the place where Sita Devi was residing. Please try to understand. Sometimes what we do is, we say, oh, my anger is like Hanuman. I use it only in devotional service. But if we are given the position of Hanuman, we will burn entire Lanka without discrimination. That is our service as Hanuman. So we will end up doing some big disservice in our anger. There are three gates to hell mentioned in Bhagavad Gita: Kam, Krodh, and Lobh. So Krodh should be avoided, and by giving these examples of Hanuman, and these are good examples for somebody whose anger is controlled, for somebody whose anger is, he has not taken the anger personally, who has not taken offense personally. Hanuman did not take the offense personally, even when his tail is set on fire. At that point of time also he is thinking, can I render some devotional service using this burning tail? This is the thought process of Hanuman. So there is no anger which touches his mind, but externally it seems like he is angry. So this is devotional anger which is dovetailed in Krishna's service. Actually speaking, that is not anger at all. It appears as anger to the world outside, but it is not anger. The devotee should control anger by all means. Please try to understand. The devotee should control anger by all means. Otherwise, very simple. Don't create disciples all over the world. Very simple. A very simple thing. Be honest. I can't control, so I won't create disciples. It's very simple. It's as simple as that. How much simpler can it get than this? I can't control this, so if I don't fulfill the conditions, I will not do the task. I will not carry out the task of the. Oh, but then who will carry on the preaching? That is Krishna's headache, not my headache. Please try to understand. I should not take Krishna. Who will carry out the preaching? Let Krishna take that headache. At least in my life, I have given that headache to Krishna. My job is to speak Shastra. Huh? Whether who will become Guru and who will not become Guru, let Krishna take that headache. Krishna has a bigger headache than me. It is whose preaching will be affected, my preaching or Krishna's preaching. So Krishna's preaching will be affected. So let Krishna take the headache of who has to become Guru. And if he wants that somebody should become Guru, Krishna will give that ability to that person. That's all, nothing else. So, second, these instructions are not only for people who want to make disciples, but for everyone. You said it is for every sadhak, these instructions are there. Anybody who wants to become a sadhak, these instructions are there. The aim is not to create disciples. Okay. From Haridas Varya Prabhu. If a person is not learned and cannot read scriptures, can he make progress by just following regulative principles and chanting? Definitely. By any one limb of bhakti, you can make progress. There are two types of progress: Ekanga Bhakti, Anekanga Bhakti in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. Ekanga Bhakti means progress through one limb of bhakti. Anekanga Bhakti means progress through multiple limbs of bhakti. So some devotees are Ekanga Bhakti. Ekanga Bhakti means they are making progress through one limb of bhakti. Some devotees are making progress through multiple limbs. But if you are focused on one limb, then that focus should be so pinpointed that it should make us run very swiftly on the path of bhajan. It does. I can't read Shastra, so I am chanting. But regarding chanting, also when we analyze their views and their siddhantas about chanting, the siddhantas are found to be not so strong. So if we are going to depend solely on chanting, then and following regulative principle, then that one limb of bhakti should be perfected in us. For example, there was one devotee, one god brother of Prabhupada, his name Kinchan Krishnadas Babaji. So he only chanted 24 hours chanting. That is Akinchan Krishnadas Babaji. And Prabhupada used to say that he is a Siddha Mahatma. He has perfected his life by chanting Hare Krishna. So that should be our level of expertise if we are dependent on one limb of. Okay. From Pavani Bhakti Mataji. Very nice. Please correct. Is NOI an instruction that Rupa Goswami gave to Jiva Goswami after he argued? Yes, some manuscripts say this. Therefore, I mentioned this incident. From Gopinath Acharya Prabhu. With respect to Bhagavad Gita 17.15, especially at workplace, typically it is noticed that most of the job requires negotiating with the managers, users, clients, colleagues. But although it is truth and beneficial, may not be pleasing and may cause agitation. Very true. Definitely, it may not be pleasing and may cause agitation. So definitely, gradually we should try to use such words which will cause as less agitation as possible. It's the material world. When speaking for business, we have to agitate some people, but that agitation should not become a pleasurable habit for us. So sadhak should not make agitating others a pleasurable habit for him. Do it only when it is necessary for business, and otherwise be very nice to people. Be very nice to people. So I learned one thing from my Shiksha Guru, His Holiness Gaur Govind Maharaj. In his general lectures, very hard hitting instructions. It's like a bullet to the head. Some instructions were very hard hitting. And some of his disciples would go and meet him personally and say, Maharaj, such big standards, four regulative principles, and we are unable to follow. Then he would give them very sweet instructions. For you, some different thing. I will tell you something. I will give some adjustment. So please try to understand. In a general meeting, in general speeches, most of the times we may speak something which may agitate people, but it should not become our habit. And in private discussions, we should definitely try to be very, very polite. Okay. If a person not able to control his urges out of will, but he tries to control by force, but his mind is focused on that urge, is it okay he fulfills the urges and focuses on devotional service? This is a tricky question. Should a person fulfill the urge? And if I say yes, it means that the speaker has given a sanction. Go ahead and fulfill your urge. So so uh, let yes.
Please accept my humble obeisance for your Prabhupada. So there is that we can refer to Bhagavatam 7th canto, 15th, Naradam Namishwar.
Yeah. Regarding this question or previous question, Prabhu?
No, this question, Prabhu.
Yeah, regarding this question, there is one verse in Bhagavad Gita which says, Karmendriyani samyam ya aste manasa smaran indriyarthan vimudhatma mithyachara sauchyate. Can you see the screen? You can see the screen. One who controls the external senses of but internally his mind is brooding upon those sense objects, that person is called a pretender actually. So very soon that person is going to, or means he is going to satisfy the urge. He doesn't need my sanction for satisfying the urge. Krishna himself is saying in the verse, without anybody's sanction, this person is going to satisfy the urge. So after satisfying the urge, what will happen is, then that person will again try to become resituated in bhakti, and Shipram Bhavati Dharmatma. Then very quickly he will be restored to the standard of bhakti. But then if this cycle continues again and again, then that person should try to become more mature and perform bhakti in a very sincere manner in order to control that urge permanently once and forever. Then after that, one can definitely give instructions to the entire world. Are there times when a devotee can speak untruth without getting reactions from telling the untruth? Definitely. This is a question from Vaikunteshwar Balaji. In Bhakti Sandarbh, Srila Jiva Goswami has spoken this thing, that see there are two times when speaking untruth does not. There are many occasions on which speaking untruth does not lead to a sin or a pap. Uh, for example, when one's life is in danger, or when one is conducting a business transaction. So in business transaction, one cannot quote the exact price. What is the selling price is always different from the cost price. So some lies have to be spoken. That is allowed in the Bhagavatam also. Satyan Ritabhyam. This is allowed for a merchant to speak some lies in a business. But for a devotee in devotional service, you can speak some untruth only if you are 100% sure that it is going to lead to the benefit of a bhakti of somebody's bhakti, and it will not cause the person to become unfavorable towards bhakti in any way whatsoever in the future. If it is not going to cause any unfavorability to anybody in their bhakti, then one can consider speaking a lie. And Bhajjiv Goswami has specified a verse in the Bhakti Sandarbh, man nimittam kritam papam api punyaya saparayate. Any sinful, any papa like speaking untruth, if it is purely for my devotional service, I consider it as punya, I consider it as piety. Okay. Krishna Das.
Sorry, Krishna, there was a question earlier by Gopinath Acharya Prabhu.
Yes.
I don't know if you said about Haridas Varya Prabhu's question.
Yes. Yeah. So with respect to 17.15, especially at workplace, typically it is noticed that most of the job requires negotiating with managers, users, clients, colleagues, and where although it is truth and it is beneficial, but it may not be pleasing and may cause agitation. True, definitely true. If there is a option between two things, if we have an option between speaking the truth and speaking something pleasing, and we should opt for speaking something pleasing. There is a verse in the Vishnu Puran about this, that between the between speaking the truth and speaking something pleasing, one should always select speaking the truth if only one of them is possible. But if both are possible, then that is much better. So between the two, one should at least speak the truth, which is beneficial, even if it means it is not pleasing. Satyam bruyat priyam bruyat. So all, speak the truth and speak the beneficial truth. That is the best thing. But if that is not possible, then at least speak the truth. Satyam vada. So that is the answer to that question. Okay. From Krishna Dasari Prabhu, question related to Shiksha Guru. Can anyone become Shiksha Guru? I see a lot of devotees saying that this devotee is Shiksha Guru. Okay, so can anyone become Shiksha Guru? Fortunately, in our Sampradaya, Srila Rupa Goswami and Srila Jiva Goswami did not give one fixed standard that this is the standard after which you should become Guru. It's a very good thing because, and Prabhupada says this in the purport to this verse of NOI. In this NOI purport, one of the purports is even a Kanishth Adhikari can become Guru. This will be in one of the purports to Nectar of Instruction. It's a very good thing because if you set one standard, then what happens is that, and one person will say, oh, I am up to that standard, so I should become Guru. And there are 10 people who will say, oh no, you are not up to the standard, so you should not become Guru. So it will turn into a big competition for who is Guru and who is not Guru. The entire thing is avoided by not keeping a very fixed standard for who is Guru. So who is Guru? If somebody accepts a certain person as authority, somebody goes to somebody and says, I accept you as Shiksha Guru. And that person himself says, okay, I accept, I will give you instruction. So that the Shiksha relationship is immediately established. Because Shiksha relationship does not need any formalities or any initiation. Shiksha relationship is simply by mutual acceptance. And there is no strict criteria imposed on a Shiksha relationship. But the Shiksha Guru, somebody who is calling himself Shiksha Guru, should make sure that he can give time to the person who is under him. And they should make sure that they are not giving some instruction which will be not beneficial or which is against Shastra. That has to be ensured by the person who is acting as the person giving shiksha. I feel confused when every they use every senior devotee as shiksha guru. No, that is, don't feel confused. Every devotee is guru. Sarve Vaishnava Guravaha. Every Vaishnava is guru. So please don't feel confused. They're all our gurus. You are also my guru, Krishna Dasari Prabhu. Because you are, through your example also I can learn many things. So for me, everybody is shiksha guru. No problem. Not only senior devotees. Or the junior devotee, new devotee, somebody is chanting one round. They are all my gurus. Not only somebody who is senior devotee. In Tattva Sandar, Jiva Goswami wards off with a curse for those who say whose aim of life is Krishna. Some might say this is Krodh. Can you please elaborate? Thank you. Okay, very nice. I would like to highlight what exactly you are saying so that devotees can understand your question. Okay, in the Tattva Sandarbha, Srila Jiva Goswami has spoken one verse, and I will show you that verse from Tattva Sandarbha so that everybody can see this verse. I am sharing that screen. Here is the screen. Srila Jiva Goswami says, Yaha Shri Krishna Padam Bhoja Bhajanai Kakilashvan. That person who is unpointedly aspiring for Krishna Bhakti. Tenaiva Drishyatam Etad. Only that person should read this Tattva Sandarbha. Anyasmai Shapathor Vitaha. To other persons, you are saying he is warding off with a curse. But Prabhu, please read here very carefully. It is not sharp. It is shapatha. Shapatha is not sharp. शपथ means in हिंदी में बाकी लोगों को मैं शपथ देता हूँ, बाकियों को कसम देता हूँ, ग्रंथ नहीं पढ़ना मेरा, ऐसा. तो it has been mistranslated in English as sharp. It is not sharp. It is shapath. Shapath means I am giving a vow to other people. Please don't read this book if you are not interested in Krishna Bhakti. So it has been mistranslated as a sharp. I give curse. But what he's not giving a curse. He's giving shapath. And everybody knows what is a shapath. Shapath is an oath. I give an oath, or I don't know how to translate it in English. In Hindi, it is very easily translated. In Urdu, it is called kasam. बाकियों को कसम देता हूँ, तुम ग्रंथ नहीं पढ़ना ये हमारा ऐसा. So I don't know how in English it will be translated, but many can understand what is the meaning of shapath. So this is not Krodha, Prabhu. Okay. Some practical tips to control anger inside family. Okay. I will give you one of the most practical tips to control anger inside family. Okay. So this is spoken by Narad Muni, and if you have Gopal Chandra Prabhu, you have asked this question. Please note this verse number I am showing on the screen, 7:14:6. Okay, please see the verse on the screen. This is by Narad Muni, and if you see what is the title of the chapter, you can see the title of chapter is Ideal Family Life. Okay, so I am quoting exactly from the proper context. I am not quoting a verse out of context. The chapter itself is called Ideal Family Life. 7:14:6. Gyatayah pitarau putra bhratra suruda pare yad vadanti yad icchanti chanu modeta nirvama. Okay, an intelligent man, Gopal Chandra Prabhu, this is referring to you. An intelligent man, okay, in human society should make his own program of activities very simple. If there are any suggestions from friends, children, parents, brothers, or anyone else, that includes one's spouse also, he should externally agree by saying, yes, that is all right. But internally, he should be determined not to create a cumbersome life in which the purpose of life will not be fulfilled. Very simple, Prabhu. Narad Muni is telling us, become an okay man. Not yes man, not no man. Prabhu. Huh? The exact Sanskrit says cha anumodeta. Cha anumodeta means we should agree. Agree doesn't mean yes. Agree means okay. So Gopal Chandra Prabhu, the answer to most of families' questions is not yes, not no. The answer to most of family members' questions is okay. And so once we learn to become an okay man, okay, so there is no fight which will occur in our house once we learn how to say okay. But some cases we cannot say okay, so sometimes it is unavoidable, but most of the times it is avoidable by saying okay.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji.
This is, life will teach us a difficult way. Why to learn in the difficult way? Learn in the easy way through Narad Muni.
Yeah.
Okay.
Hare Krishna.
Yes. Problems happen in family when the head of the family doesn't say okay. That's all. That is the source of all the problems. Ask the family members if you want. They will tell you. Okay. The verse focus on making disciples, but is applicable to anyone who is not focused on. Why is it mentioned only for making disciples? From Pavani Bhakti Mataji. The verse focuses on making disciples, but is applicable to anyone who is not focused on making disciples also. Why is it mentioned only? What may be the context to it? The context is that a new devotee is often. I've read the previous commentators, but they have not specified on this aspect. So whatever is being said here is my understanding. I have to be clear. Okay, whatever I am speaking here is my understanding of the verse, because I have read all the previous commentators, but they have not spoken about this aspect. So because they have not spoken about this aspect, so I have to give something which, after reading from various angles, what I have personally come to a conclusion. My personal conclusion in this regard is, because a new devotee always thinks, when will I become a senior devotee and when will people consider me as an authority? For such people, and many there are many times a new devotee also has this urge to try and instruct others. As soon as they learn one thing, they immediately go and try to teach somebody else that I learned this thing. So that tendency is present within them right from the very beginning. So since they are having this tendency, Rupa Goswami says, well, you can exercise that tendency only after you fulfill these 6 conditions. If I don't fulfill these 6 conditions, then there are two things. Either you teach only about those conditions which you have fulfilled, means practice, you preach only what you have practiced in your life. And Prabhupada used to give the example of Gandhiji. Gandhiji, one time one lady came to him and said, Gandhiji, my son, he eats sugar every day. Can you please tell him not to eat sugar? He will listen to you. So Gandhiji said, come back after 1 week. So after 1 week, she came back and said, can you please tell my son not to eat sugar? So Gandhiji told her son, you should not eat sugar. She said, Arey, you could have told this last week also. So Gandhiji said, 1 week I was myself avoiding sugar. Before I could give your son an instruction, 1 week I was myself avoiding sugar. So this story was narrated by Prabhupada that as much of these 6 we can follow, only that much we should teach. This is a principle of honesty. If I am able to follow Jivva Vegam, suppose I eat frugally, then I get the adhikar to tell people that Baba, you should eat frugally. This is a very common sense. I should only tell people about something if I have practiced it myself. That's all. And this is about personal instructions. Shishyat. About giving personal instruction, we should give personal instructions to someone only when we have practiced it in our life. And if somebody tells us, give us a lecture, or Hari Prasad will give a lecture, I can say, all very nice. So it's not a personal instruction. Then I can say, Rupa Goswami says, Vacho Vegam, Manasaha Krodha Vegam, Jihva Vegam. So it's not Hari Prasad Das, oh Vacho Vegam, Manasaha Krodha Vegam. If Hari Prasad Das is going to say to somebody personally, then Hari Prasad Das better ensure in his life he is following. Okay, but if Hari Prasad Das has to give a general lecture, then Hari Prasad Das better ensure that he says that it is Rupa Goswami who is controlled in 6 surges who is saying Vacho Vegam, Manasa Krodha Vegam. That is the difference. And therefore it is not, The reason why making disciples is mentioned is this tendency is there in many devotees since the very beginning, and they have to be told that in order to perform the function of Shiksha or Diksha Guru, it's not that everybody gets a free run. You have to have some qualification. You can become without qualification also, but then the disciples will quickly realize that my Guru is not capable of taking me ahead. My Guru is utterly incapable of giving me direction in life, utterly incapable. And then such a disciple will externally give pranams, internally will not have faith. And then not having faith in the Guru is an offense for whom? It is offense for the disciple. Why put the disciple in such a precarious position? Guru should be so expert, he should give Shastric answers and follow it also. That is Guru. That is actually a Guru. That is what Prabhupada himself was. That is the standard which we should follow. Okay, Sanket Prabhu. If the idea is not to make many disciples, how would the world benefit Krishna, understand Krishna without Guru? So that is Krishna's headache. Very specifically. You can print books and distribute unlimitedly. And print books and give them knowledge. See, and there are millions of people around the world, billions of people. You give them general knowledge of Krishna Bhakti by distributing the books. Out of them, a few lakh will get interested. Out of them, a few thousand will be interested in becoming disciples. That can be taken care of. When we say, oh, we want to preach throughout, which means we want to make the entire world second initiated. Sir, that is not going to happen in Kali. That is not going to happen in this age. We can give Krishna Bhakti in general to the entire world. You can make the entire world chant the names of Krishna. But Prabhu, to make everybody an initiated disciple throughout the world, that even Prabhupada said it is not possible. We can make everybody Prithivite Achayatha Nagaradi Gram Sarvatra Prachar Haive Moranam. Everywhere corner of the world, Mahaprabhu said, my name will be heard. My name will be spoken. He never said that everybody will become an initiated devotee. That may not happen. So without there will be gurus, but the number of disciples will also be limited. They will not be unlimited disciples. And so in some exceptional cases like Srila Prabhupada, he created so many thousands of disciples. But that exception was needed because the movement was just starting. In the first generation also, some exceptions were needed because the movement was expanding. In the second generation also, a few exceptions may be needed because the movement has not spread everywhere. But after that, when the movement is well spread, then you can't make the exception the rule. The rule is given in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and that is not going to change. It is not going to change. Despite thousands of people thinking, it is not going to change. The rule is that people should not think that I am going to make thousands of disciples. That is the rule. And that rule is for the benefit. Jiva Goswami has said in the commentary to that verse, it's not simply for increasing your sampradaya. This is Jiva Goswami's exact comment. Making disciples is not for increasing your sampradaya. So it's very important to understand this thing. Okay, Maunika Mataji, is this verse represent Shraddha Shreya of devotional service? No, this verse doesn't represent. This verse is simply a prerequisite for entering into devotional service. The prerequisite is not even Shraddha, also is not even spoken of here. Nothing about Bhakti is spoken here. Only don't do this, don't do this, don't do this, control this, control this, control. Bhakti is not spoken. This is only a prerequisite for entering into the seva of becoming a guru. Becoming guru is also a seva. So it should be taken as a seva, not as a privilege. So only for performing that specific seva of acting as someone's guru, that this specific verse, it has nothing to do with execution of bhakti. So this verse is only a prerequisite for performing that specific seva of acting as someone's shiksha or diksha guru. Okay. Vaikunteshwar Balaji Prabhu, any thoughts on how to go about finding a guru? This is a very important question. How to go about finding a guru? So this question actually is applicable to somebody who is not initiated. Once somebody is initiated, they have already found a guru. So somebody is not initiated, the ideal process for finding a guru is to sincerely pray to Krishna to send a proper guru and to wait for that day when the heart will be spontaneously attracted to a guru, and that the indication will be that the guru will be able to understand what is in our heart and will be able to give us very specific instructions which will clear out all the doubts which we have been having in the heart. So those are indications from Krishna. And Prabhupada also said on many occasions, Krishna will send you guru. So Krishna, it is actually Krishna who sends us a guru. It's not we who go about find. We have, of course, we have to find, we have to look at the devotees who are out there, but not with the intention that we will judge them with our criteria. If he is my guru, this should not be there. We know, don't use your criteria. If we judge a guru by our criteria, then what is happening is we are projecting our requirements on the guru, and our requirements may not exactly be the best thing that we need in our spiritual life. The best thing that we need in spiritual life is what Krishna's requirements are. What requirements does Krishna want in our guru? The best thing is for us to pray to Krishna, and then at the same time externally take inspiration from various devotees, but specifically be on the lookout for that devotee to whom our heart is spontaneously very much attracted, and at the same time that guru should be able to read our heart, read the feelings in our heart, and give us proper solutions in order to make us move ahead in our bhajan. This is the proper way of, traditional way of finding a guru. The other ways are also there, that somebody selects a guru based on specific criteria. That is also another way of finding guru. So depending on what is the inclination of the disciple should go about praying to Krishna. So the best way is to pray to Krishna. This is what I have heard from my authorities. Okay, so I think we have reached the end of questions. Thank you very much.
Right.
And please note one thing: yadatra skalitam kinchit vidvamsah purayantu tat yadatra sausthavam kinchit tad guroreva menahi yadatra skalitam kinchit. It's possible I may have made some mistake in speaking some. Definitely, human being means 4 mistakes, 4 errors. So every human being with 4 defects. It is possible that I may have made some errors in speaking something. If I have made some errors, vidvamsah purayantu tat. You are all learned devotees. You please correct those errors. But yadatra sausthavam kinchit. If you like something, please remember that guru reva. It belongs to my guru janas. Nahi, it doesn't belong to me. Whatever I have learned from my ABC, Ka, Kha, Ga in my childhood, from my alphabet to Bhakti Rasamrit Sindhu, everything is taught by Guru. I did not learn anything by my own. So whatever nice things that you learned, those were given to me by my Gurujanas. So all the credit goes to those Gurujanas. Thank you very much, dear devotees. Hare Krishna.
Hari Parshad Prabhu, thank you very much for this super excellent class. Your knowledge of Shastras combined with your humility, combined with your grace, and the very eloquent way you present in a very soothing and calming way, it touches the hearts of many, many souls. And I pray to Krishna that he give you all strength, all wealth, and so that you can retire early from teaching computer sciences and make this mission to educate devotees all over the world. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you, Prabhu. I am very happy to touch the hearts of devotees. But actually, I wanted to physically touch I wanted to embrace you physically, Prabhu, by coming to Austin. But just look at Maya's arrangement, that she did not allow me to travel to Austin. I could have embraced you, not only touched your heart, but also touched you personally, Prabhu. But
yeah, Parshad Prabhu, that was Srivas Pandit
Prabhu from sorry.
Right.
Same thing, Namaste Prabhu. That was Srivas Pandit Prabhu from Silicon Valley who just spoke and so eloquently glorified you. So Prabhu, one advantage, though we are not here physically and that really hurts us, but the one good thing is that because of this situation, we have devotees who are called in from various cities across US today, were able to participate in this session. Thank you so much, Hari Parshad Prabhu, for that absolutely wonderful class. We will be meeting here again tomorrow on the same Zoom link and on Facebook, starting at 7:30 p.m. Central. to continue with the next 5 verses. Ramajay Prabhu, were you going to say something? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to speak over you.
No, that I was just about to say that was Srivas Pandit Prabhu glorifying Haripashar Prabhu, and devotees have joined in from ISV congregation as well today. So thank you.
I see devotees. We have devotees from ISV, we have devotees from Columbus. These are the 2 cities that at least I'm aware of that devotees have joined. And of course, in San Antonio, we have a few devotees. So kind of all over the place. So thank you so much, Prabhu, for bringing all of us together virtually. I also wanted to say on a lighter note, you could hear those wonderful bird sounds in the background. I don't think I've ever heard sounds in Mumbai like that. So that was very pleasant to hear.
It felt like you are sitting in a forest somewhere and giving
a It felt like that. Felt like Prabhu was in Vrindavan and literally in Vrindavan giving class. Again, thank you so much, devotees. We'll be meeting back here at 7:30. We look forward to serving with all of you. Again, thank you so much, Haripashar Prabhu, for taking valuable time from your morning today for sharing this nectar of instruction. Hare Krishna. We'll meet everyone.
Thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you. Prabhupada ki jai.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.